This is Plant-Based Briefing, Dairy and Increased Risk of MS from switchforgood.org. And I'm Marian Erickson, your host of the curated content Plant-Based Podcast for people who are short on time but curious about plant-based and vegan living. I find a variety of articles and blogs and get permission and read them to you here in about 10 minutes or less every weekday. I have a list of about 25 or so regular contributors who've given me permission to share their content. And today, I'm going to be sharing an article from switchforgood.org. They're an evidence-based nonprofit dedicated to rattling the accepted norms around dairy and health. They're working to abolish the current system of dietary racial oppression, and they're promoting solutions for climate change. They're founded by Olympic medalist Dotsie Bausch, and they have a great podcast hosted by Dotsie and Baywatch actress and health coach Alexandra Paul. They have tons of resources on their website, many of them geared towards athletes and athletic performance and recovery. And now let's get to today's plant-based briefing. Dairy and Increased Risk of MS from switchforgood.org. Multiple sclerosis, MS, affects nearly 1 million people in the United States alone. While it may not touch everyone's life, it can be devastating for both the diagnosed and their families. Identified as an autoimmune condition, MS is a progressive disease in which the immune system attacks the myelin, the protective layer around nerve fibers, and causes communication issues between the brain and the body. There is no cure, but emerging research suggests that there are ways to reduce one's risk and assuage certain symptoms. Dairy and saturated fats. In a recent scientific review titled The Role of Diet in Multiple Sclerosis, Mechanistic Connections and Current Evidence, dairy is observed to increase the risk of MS across multiple studies. Dating back to 1950, researcher R.L. Swank published findings on the incidence of MS in relation to the intake of meat and dairy-based fats. He conducted a prolonged study from 1951 to 2001, following 144 MS patients who consumed a diet low in saturated fats, less than 20 grams per day. The participants who adhered to the diet long-term experienced significantly less disability and lower mortality rates than those who no longer limited their saturated fat intake. All dairy contains saturated fat. Just a quarter cup of shredded cheese contains 6 grams, and even 2% milk contains 3 grams of saturated fat. Cutting out dairy alone can significantly lower one's saturated fat intake, and consequently may help to reduce the debilitating symptoms of MS. A 2017 pediatric study supported Swank's claims. 219 participants were observed over a 2-year period, and researchers found a positive correlation between fat consumption and relapse rate. As little as a 10% increase in saturated fat intake tripled the participants' risk of symptom relapse. On the other hand, a high intake of vegetables and plant-based foods seemed to lower the relapse rate. According to the study's author, the McDougall diet, a plant-based, low-fat diet, is currently being reviewed as a potential strategy to manage fatigue in MS patients. Dairy and increased disease activity. Data gathered from the Nurses' Health Study cohorts also demonstrated a strong link between dairy intake and increased risk of MS. Research found that women who consumed 3 or more servings of whole milk a day during adolescence increased their risk of developing MS by 47% compared to those who consumed less than 1 serving a day. Yet another study, Holism, Health Outcomes in a Sample of People with MS, surveyed 2,047 MS patients and discovered that those who did not consume dairy at all reported higher health quality of life and less recent disease activity than those who included dairy in their diet. The same study also reported that a higher intake of vegetables was associated with reduced levels of patient-reported disease activity and disability. The takeaway: those who are not lactose intolerant may not realize the detriments of dairy immediately. They could consume it for years and not experience any significant health issues. But that does not mean they're not immune to its harmful side effects. Among other ailments, from cancer to diabetes, dairy could increase one's risk of developing MS, and by the time one is diagnosed, it's too late. It doesn't take much to be proactive in regards to health. Ditch dairy and set yourself up for long-term health. You just listened to Dairy and Increased Risk of MS from switchforgood.org. And I'm Marian Erickson. And the surprising and frankly disturbing part for me from this information is that you can be consuming dairy for years and not experience any issues and think everything's fine. But down the road, boom, the harmful side effects hit you. And if you're interested in learning more about plant-based diets and MS, I recommend the Corinne Nidger podcast. She has many episodes about MS and plant-based diets, and she herself has an amazing success story. In fact, I read her success story in this podcast, episode 79, which I'll put a link in the show notes. So please share this with anyone you know who may benefit from it, and please ditch dairy for your health. Thanks for listening.